Hello, I'm Beck. Welcome to my channel. Today I'll be drawing a D&D character based on the roll of the dice.
Let's bring out the Tower of Destiny!
So we have a halfling who's become a Lycan Wererat at some point during their lives, but grew up as a sage, which is very interesting as a background for a Wererat because it conjured a lot of potential backstory inspiration. I'll get into that in a minute, but you can see from the inspiration pictures that I wanted to illustrate the sort of the scholarly vibe coupled with sort of rattish facial features, and then also something to indicate that they have been attacked at some point in their life. They weren't born that way. So let's get started. Now, since my last video, I have expanded my lists. You may have noticed while I was doing the rolls that instead of having just the player's handbook, species and class and things, I have made it so I can roll a d20 for everything other than the subclass, which is still going to be divided into just 4 options, just to keep things simple for my brain. This one, the Lycan, doesn't exist as its own class officially in D&D. It is like there are lycanthropes in the game and they can bite you and you can become a Lycan in addition to your class, but I've always found that it's very complicated. It's a very complicated thing to have to play. If your character gets bitten by a Lycan, it's complicated enough that I think it should be its own class. That's just my opinion though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you disagree. But yeah, particularly there are parts of it that specify it takes over your personality. So if you were a paladin and you've got this like altruistic goal where you've made your promise of faith to whatever, that might no longer matter to you once you become a lycanthrope. So essentially you would stop being a paladin and you'd have to be something else instead. Like I think there's Oathbreaker, I guess you could play it that way, but again, for something where it's a monster that bites you and infects you, the gameplay mechanics of becoming a Lycan, they're just too complicated to not be a class. That's my opinion. Where was I? Okay, so with this character, I'm going to call her Penny. Her background is sage, and I thought that was just really, really helpful in creating depth to the character, because when you have someone who's a lycanthrope, it's very easy to just have them be like this really badass character who's like a wererat, very grungy, and she's still grungy, but the depth comes from her background, and as the sage as the sage background describes, she spent her formative years traveling between manors and monasteries, performing various odd jobs and services in exchange for access to their libraries. So this tells me that she probably was quite poor and maybe even an orphan. I was thinking that perhaps what happened was her parents dropped her off at a monastery to go and do something dangerous and keep her safe while they're gone, and like they died. They died doing the dangerous thing, so they never came back. And so she was kind of just left there, and potentially like she found her refuge in books and libraries, and her motivation was to just like escape into the world of books and imagination. And particularly in old libraries, I expect there would be some rats running around. So I think she maybe made friends with the rats there and might have come across a wererat unintentionally. And when it bit her or when it attacked her, I think it was one of those cases of like when a when a werewolf has no control over themselves. I think maybe this was a case where like she made a friend in the library who turned out to be a wererat and bit her, attacked her when they weren't in control of themselves. And so now there is two, at least, because she's also become a wererat, and she's continuing her thing of like trying to find different books in different libraries and explore the world by gaining access to different people's libraries, particularly like when they say traveling between monasteries and manors. So like very rich people might take her on as a servant or something in exchange for letting her use the library. I think that's just a really interesting slant for a character to take. So I wanted her to have sort of dingy clothing, sort of torn and ripped, and she's taken on some ratish qualities, but she also looks very scholarly, and I think she's very, like, her motivation is related to her books. So unlike a wizard who sort of needs the books to have their magic, she would have some spells because a sage's feat is magic initiate brackets wizard, which means you do get some wizard spells. But she would probably have just memorized those spells and has her books more as like a safety blanket. So she's very, very protective of her books, even if it's just like an encyclopedia. Like it's something that nobody can really understand why she thinks this book is so important. But the fact that she thinks it's important means they want to steal it because they think that maybe it's been masked and it's actually a really important grimoire. But it's literally just a book that she was allowed to keep once, and she doesn't usually get to keep the books, so it's a big deal to her. That's where my brain went with this character. Yeah. In terms of why Penny would join an adventuring party and maybe leave her libraries behind to go exploring, I mean, firstly, wherever she goes, she'll be looking out for libraries. But secondly, I think part of it would be the safety in numbers thing. So like maybe she does want to keep exploring libraries, but she doesn't feel safe going from town to town on her own or kingdom to kingdom by herself. So when an opportunity arises to join an adventuring party, she might join it for that reason. She might even meet the adventuring party when they go into a library that she's inhabiting. So she might be like scurrying around, hiding behind shelves and things, and overhear what their plan is and offer to help them in exchange for them helping her get access to more libraries. Another possibility, which is more of a hook where like the DM would have to like focus in on this character a little bit, would be if she overhears that the adventuring party are actually looking for her parents. Like she would know their names. It might even be a case of like they've been to the halfling village that she grew up in, and they have reason to believe that the people there weren't killed, they were just like kidnapped and they're being kept somewhere. They're all prisoners. So she would obviously want to join up to help them save her parents so she can be reunited with them, and it would be great and wonderful. Of course, that, like I said, that's focusing in on her story very in particularly. That's not a word. But it also depends on what the rest of your party is. Like, you could have a whole party of halflings, in which case they're not just looking for her parents, they're looking for their own family. And they might even realize that this is a long-lost sister or cousin or something, where part of their original mission was to find her, and maybe they thought that she was with her parents, a prisoner in wherever it is they got taken. They might have even used some sort of scrying to find that they could only find her, and the rest of the halfling people are being cloaked by magic, but they found her because she's not being cloaked by magic, she's just lost. You could also deepen the hook further by saying that these halflings that have been taken are the guardians of a magnificent treasure. So rather than just trying to find the halflings for the fact that they're missing, if the party isn't a party of halflings, if they're a mixed species party, which is how you usually would play it, maybe what the party is looking for is this treasure, and one of the steps along the way is to release the guardians of the treasure so they can tell you where it is. I mean, obviously they're guardians, so it will be kind of difficult to get them to divulge that information, but they might be willing to help you out, especially if the treasure isn't something you necessarily steal. It could be that the reason Penny is so obsessed with books is that her people for generations have been protecting the Library of Alexandria. I think that's what it's called, but like this lost library of ancient knowledge with very powerful magical tomes and like you know, treasure isn't always silver and gold, that whole thing, where the party could be looking for this library so that they can learn more information but keep the library intact. In which case, recovering the guardians would be very beneficial, and having someone such as Penny join their party would be extra useful, because not only would she, in her Wererat powers, be able to fight well, she would also, once reunited with her family, help them to want to help the party in accessing this protected treasure. So with this lighting, I kind of struggled a little bit. I wanted it to look like someone had just sort of cracked open a door and she was like, but I've kind of quickly realized that the way I'm getting used to doing lighting and shadowing, the light source needs to sort of be not coming directly from in front. So I don't know if the shadows really correspond with if the point of light source is just right hitting her in the face, but you know, I tried. Live and learn. I think it did come out pretty well overall, but of course the part of her that's in shadow doesn't really get to have any kind of like lighting, because there's the light and shade where I sort of do highlights and sort of undertone shadows. So I did a little bit of highlighting on her face, but for the rest of her body, which is in shadow, I didn't really do any. So I felt like I was half-assing the lighting, because I usually do the whole character gets lighting and shadows all over, but when most of her is in shadow, that doesn't really work so well. There would be kind of a secondary light source, not just the door opening, but just the sort of ambient light that is around that would cast some shadows. But yeah, I think it came out okay. Let me know if you're a drawer, if you an artist like to also draw. Do you struggle with shadows and things? Do you have any special tricks that help you? Especially if you're trying to create an effect like this, where it's sort of implying that there's just a ray of light from an open door or something like that. Let me know if you have tips and tricks, especially if there are any tutorials that are online that you would recommend. Please let me know about them. But otherwise, yes, this is Penny, the Wererat halfling who's obsessed with books and reading and is a sage. Or at least she used to be a sage. Now she's an adventurer looking for her lost family. I kind of want to play as this character now, but the problem with when I make a character like this is the thing that's exciting me about playing the character is the story that she's a part of, which means I would kind of need the DM to, like, I'd probably need to be the DM and someone else would have to be the character. That's the catch-22 when you're playing a game like this. I guess if I had a DM who took that hook of like that's what the party's trying to do, then I could play this character and the other people in my party could play other characters, and then we don't know how the story ends, and that's what makes it exciting. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you next time.